everyone, my name is Vina, aka Miss WOC Reader, and welcome back to my channel. And today I just wanted to talk about Romancelandia. So the past 2 days, it's been pretty wild on Twitter. If you've never heard of Romancelandia, it's like a romance community that's both on Twitter and Reddit. And a lot of times it's very insular and you have a lot of people speaking on behalf of all romance readers, which is why I tend to mostly stay away from it. There are great romance readers that I really enjoy talking to and seeing their perspective and getting recommendations from. But for the most part, they're not all up in Romancelandia. Like, it was just wild the stuff I was seeing the past few days, because we saw this one author. She called out Steve, who is like a romance historian. He knows so much about romance. He has so much knowledge and he follows all these stories. And she was basically telling him to not have an opinion about romance because he said you can subvert the happily ever after or happy for now. And you know what? I went on the Romance Writers of America website and their definition of romance just said it requires two basic elements, which is a central love story and an emotionally satisfying or optimistic ending. So that's not the same definition we often see presented of romance, where it's like you have to have a happily ever after or happy for now. I'm not saying don't enjoy those stories. I enjoy those stories. And it's funny that like those of us who spoke out about our happily ever after not necessarily ending with this, like the couple being together, is not actually considered romance. And we were like talking about like getting accused of dragging. No one dragged anybody in that conversation. I don't know what they were talking about, but we were just saying everybody's happily ever after doesn't exactly look the same. And a good point was brought up. So some of us really do enjoy love stories where you get like that older person who is reminiscing about their deceased spouse and the life they lived together and meeting and growing together on their journey. And there were a lot of people who actually said that that's not a romance. Can you believe that? Like, you're watching their love story. Yes, it happens to be in flashbacks, but it's still there. And they were trying to say that's not a romance. And that because if somebody dies in the book, it's not a romance. I thought it was till death do us part. So they could be happy for years and years and years, and that happens to people too. Like their spouse dies years earlier than them. That doesn't mean they didn't love them. That doesn't mean they still don't love them. Like I've met like a lot of older people who they had their one true love who they adored, and they were actually never with anybody else after. One of my great aunts is like that. My uncle was really the love of her life, and she hasn't been with anybody since, and he's been deceased for years and years. And that was her love story, and she still remembers him fondly, and can reminisce on the great times that they had together. And they had 4 children together. So it's not like that, like once that person is deceased, like everything that happened no longer applies. And so I didn't understand that argument, and I do think that a lot of people are holding on to this very rigid definition of romance. Like also, people think that if you're not following the traditional third act structure for romance, that it's not really a romance. And Tasha L. Harrison actually brought up a good point where she said other genres aren't held to that same standard. And it was true, because other genres are able to play with different elements that romance is not. And actually, I've recently been kind of preferring reading fantasy romance or even like romantic suspense, because they don't have some of the other drama that is kind of expected. And fantasy romance is cool. Like I also like following like the characters from book to book and seeing them together mostly the whole time. There's usually a lot going on where they don't necessarily throw in that breakup for no reason, which really gets on my nerves, and you just kind of see like the couple working through other stuff. And I remember having a conversation about that on Twitter where they said there aren't a lot of series, it feels like, in romance where you follow couples from like across multiple books. And somebody did point out you're more likely to see that in fantasy romance because there's just other elements going on that they're focusing on, whereas like a lot of romance stories you're just focusing on the meeting and like the lusty moments and then like the love and then like we're living happily ever after. I really do enjoy happily ever after. It's like, give me a good Cinderella romance any day, and I get really excited about those. And I do like some formulaic stuff because I do read at least one category romance every single month. But I also do like when authors kind of play with what a romance looks like, especially since we are all people of different backgrounds and different cultures, we different religions, different identities, and our happy ending doesn't always look the same. Happy ending doesn't always mean marriage and a baby. Actually, those romance books that end with a proposal or with a rushed baby actually get on my nerves. Those, for some reason, those are always my like three-star reads, because like that rushed ending where it's like they've known each other for a month and they're rushing to get engaged, or like they throw in a surprise pregnancy right there at the end. I don't like the idea of like a baby solidifying the relationship and keeping people together. I don't know, I guess I just seen too much nonsense in real life to buy into that fairy tale, and it feels like very traditional old school way of thinking for me. But I've really been thinking recently of like what romance looks like to different people and how we can bend and shape it. But it's interesting too because there's like stuff in dark romance, like some people are writing pedophilia, some people are writing incest, some people are writing sexual assault and trying to turn it into love, and that's considered okay because it has a happily ever after at the end, even though it was the grossest abuse on page. Like, I remember I read my first rape romance like 10 years ago, and it was like I think it was like a early or late 2000s published book, and it was like a fantasy romance, and literally the first sex scene was sexual assault. The second one, all of a sudden it was like she wanted it, and she wanted, like, they just like fell into a relationship after that, which was really, really gross and weird. And it was kind of hard, like, even then when I was a lot younger reading that and being like, what is going on? And even in some like historical romance and stuff like that, that non-consent is really held to a high standard. I kind of find that I have to be careful with backlist because some behavior was considered okay that I really don't consider okay now. And it's like a staple in romance, like that guy, like where the main heroine is telling him no and he's like, no, yes, you really mean yes, and like forcing her to basically love him. That's not cute to me. But those things are held as okay because, well, they're living happily ever after, or at least happy for now. So I just think people need to really stop and, one, realize that it's not just the online romance community. There are millions of romance readers out there. Most of them aren't even online. If you actually go talk to people who aren't involved in the online book community, then you will see that what they consider a romance is very different from what is pushed as a romance. Like, they don't care that you don't consider that one book a romance because it didn't follow a certain structure. Like, they just really don't care. And they don't care that you're holding the specific definition. So sometimes it's good to actually get outside of like the online book community, get some clarity, and hear about how other people are discussing books to really open up your mind, and it might even change your perspective a little bit. But I just wanted to have a quick discussion about this. Like, romance comes in all different forms. You may or may not like the form that you're seeing it in. That doesn't necessarily invalidate it. And, you know, holding on to those very strict definitions of romance can actually hold the genre back. Also, give men their space to actually be in romance. Like, I saw the weirdest thing from Tessa Dare where she was talking about vetting men, and I'm like, what do you mean vetting? This is not a sorority. This is not the Navy. Why are you deciding who can or cannot speak on romance? Like, that doesn't even make any sense to me. And I'm like, what is your criteria for vetting people anyway? Like, this is why, like, a lot of men don't even, like, even when they do read romance, they don't want to necessarily engage, like, online about it, because they're expected to, like, fall in line and kiss ass. And no, some stuff in romance rates men very weirdly and holds on to these very, actually, there's a lot of misogyny, like, in romance when you really sit back and think about some of the stuff, like, that is idolized. And it's okay to push back on some of that and have a discussion. So that's all I wanted to say today. If you liked this video, make sure and hit that like button. Thanks so much for watching, and I will check in with you guys soon. Bye!